Welcome to My Tech Opinion, Episode 8. My name is Phil Edwards in Melbourne, and I'll be joined in a moment by my co-host in Perth, Shane Johnston. This episode's feature topic is looking at tech journalism, and our special guest on the episode is freelance technology journalist Adam Turner. So let's get the show underway now. Back to My Tech Opinion, and of course this is episode number 8. My name is Phil Edwards and I'm in Melbourne, as you can see at the top of the screen, and joined by my regular co-host who's on the right hand side of the screen. If you're watching on the video in Perth, Shane Johnston. G'day Shane, how are you?
Well, Phil, yourself?
Excellent. I'm excellent. We'll have a chat in a moment, but My Tech Opinion is brought to you by Aussie Tech Heads Web Hosting. For great hosting plans and support, visit athwebhosting.com.au. Those who haven't caught the show before, My Tech Opinion covers off briefly on the latest in tech news and has a look each week at a feature topic. And it's not just us like it has been in previous episode. This week, we will have guests take part in the conversation. And this week, our feature topic is tech journalism, and we'll be joined in a few moments by freelance tech journalist Adam Turner. We'll get into the news in a moment, but I just thought I'd say hi and, do all that sort of stuff. How's it all going over there in Perth?
Everything is returning to normality. I am slowly kind of going back to my normal kind of boring kind of life. No health issues to kind of really talk about. Still trying to sell the house. Yeah, it's good. Still trying to sell the house. I did make a bit of a decision during the week in relation to kind of, because everything's kind of on hold until this house sells. Yes. And so I had to make the decision to actually not go back to the US this year and go to the Microsoft Ignite conference like I had planned, because they're starting to want things booked and paid for and all that kind of stuff now. And I can't do that until I sell the house. So the fallback plan is, and I've reached out to my the travel agent I normally use. Haven't heard back to her, but I have a feeling she, ironically, might actually be in Florida at the moment. But the plan is to, in September, go to some football game in Melbourne. I don't know who's playing yet, but people tell me it's going to be a good event. So hopefully I'll be over there for a couple of days leading into that. Go to that football game. And then the plan is to chuff off up to the Gold Coast for a couple of days, just to have a few days of R&R. Given the first couple of months of 2018, I'll probably definitely need it by then.
Absolutely. Well, that's a good move. Well, you never know, if you're in Melbourne, we might have to actually have a show where we both have Melbourne lift the top side of the screen. You never know.
Exactly.
We might have to look at that.
And
so it's good.
I might even gate crash your other podcast.
That's not a bad idea. Geeks Interrupted, if you're wondering what that is, and you can listen live Mondays at 8 o'clock Eastern time, or on the podcast, just do a search for Geeks Interrupted. So there's some self-promotion.
Nothing like cross-promotion.
Absolutely. All good on my side. I know house stuff and talking about football. I'm in the middle of doing that season. I'm an avid Hawthorn watcher, and I also do radio for the Box Hill Hawks in the VFL competition. So throwing nettle in the weekends is always a bit of fun. So we're well and truly in the swing of that for the next few months. So always good.
Don't you occasionally do the show before Geeks Interrupted, the VFL show? Don't you occasionally do that?
Yeah, occasionally do the VFL Rewind as well. If people can hear my voice talking about football or tech, and that's about as exciting as it gets.
Interesting combination.
So, I know. It's interesting doing a show where you're talking about football and then literally having about a 3-minute break and then jumping into a completely different topic set. So it doesn't leave much room for breathing. I can tell you that. So, but I have a week off this week, which is good. I'm looking forward to it.
Week off from the VFL or from the Geeks?
From the VFL.
Okay.
I'll be on Geeks Interrupted, but I don't have to worry about the VFL, which is nice, which is good. We might get into the show, and before we get into our hot topic and our feature topic and talk to Adam Turner, let's have a look at the latest in tech news. And let's have a look at tech news on My Tech Opinion. There's been one story in the past week that's pretty well eclipsed everything else, and that is Facebook and its founder, Mark Zuckerberg, fronting US Congress. Facebook has largely been independently for the past 14 years without any oversight by regulators or governments. However, we got a view into the company this week through Mark Zuckerberg's testimony to US Congress. The chief executive officer's testimony, which ran for around 10 hours, answering to US Senate and House politicians, kickstarted a new era of government scrutiny on Facebook, whose relatively swift emergence outpaced any regulations on the books at its founding. While questions range from data privacy to prescription drug sales to employee diversity, most lines of inquiry highlighted the challenge of trying to grasp and confront Facebook's immense power in consumers' lives in ways most of its users don't completely understand. Congress is looking more broadly at Facebook's reach beyond the user data leaks that brought Zuckerberg to testify. While investors were cheered by Zuckerberg's claimed calm responses to barrages of questions, many politicians have begun to express outrage at the ways the company has run its business for years. There were dozens of unanswered or follow-up questions that the executive promised his team would respond to later, and some of his talking points aren't likely to hold up to future analysis. The 33-year-old Zuckerberg frequently argued, for example, that Facebook's 2 billion users, not the company, own the data that's shared via its network and can decide whether they wish to prevent Facebook from having it. The line almost worked until the Democratic Party's Kathy Castor and Ben Lujan pointed out that the company is collecting personal data on people who don't use the social network and have never signed up to their privacy agreement. Zuckerberg said that the company tracks non-users for security purposes without even elaborating. But there were further questions about the information Facebook collects on members who are logged out of the social network on websites that track Facebook users in hidden ways, an option the company openly touts to advertisers, but most users aren't aware of. Zuckerberg didn't know how to answer some of the queries about that tracking, and told the committee that his staff would follow up. It was an interesting week. There was a couple of things that I took out of it. One was Facebook have even pushed about having potentially a paid tier, so that you would be potentially immune from some of the advertiser behavior as a result of that. But also was almost a bit of a lack of understanding by members of Congress who I think were asking questions about the paid tier and free things. And it's like, well, how do you make money? And it's like, well, advertising.
Yeah. They definitely, a lot of them are definitely not in the demographic that Facebook was designed to cater for.
Yeah. And I think, we've talked a bit about it on the show before. I've talked about it on my own other podcasts and program. If you are getting something for free, chances are you are the product.
Yep.
You are not the consumer. Because Mark Zuckerberg is worth billions of dollars. Facebook is worth billions of dollars, and it makes a lot of money, but you don't pay for it. So who does?
Mm.
And, it goes the same with Google and things like that. So you would argue that the only thing that I can think of that is probably truly a free service, but it does have ulterior motives, is, and this is not limited to this, of course, but I'm just using this as an example, is something like Apple's iCloud, but they sort of have that as a gateway drug to, for the want of a better term, to a paid tier. So you get X amount for nothing, and then you go further from there. or alternatively, to use that, you've had to have already purchased an Apple product.
Yeah.
But when you've not paid into an ecosystem at all, so we'll talk about. I'm trying to think of a good example. Well, Gmail. Gmail's a great ubiquitous service that it that they've got to make money from somewhere. They can't provide that through the goodness of their own heart, and that causes that's just the way it is. And if people don't understand that, then I personally think that they're kidding themselves, and maybe they should have their pen license removed. That's just my sort of thought about it.
Yeah. I thought he, in general, was well prepared. He handled a lot of the questions well. Yeah, he deflected and he kind of said, I'll get back to you about some of the stuff. There were, as we touched on, some of the senators asking weird questions because they clearly didn't understand the technology. I was surprised to hear that even if you're not even using Facebook at the time, they can still track you, but that explains why I was getting those ads from IT Pro TV. And now you're saying that you don't even have to be a Facebook member and they can still work out what you're doing.
Yeah, and I think it's through the cookie in your browser is the thing that remembers your login details and things like that, is the one that helps. If you want to really be covered on your tracking and things like that, stay in a private window. It doesn't stop certain data being tracked, but particularly from your internet service provider. So the whole metadata conversation is separate, but it certainly helps with things like browser history and things like that as well. If you've got it ticked on a website that says "Don't remember me," so that you have to type a password in every time you log back into that website, you're probably starting the right path for not being tracked as much. But we want everything for free, so that's how you go. I mean, even Netflix isn't advertiser driven because of their type of product that they are, but the amount of data that even Netflix holds on your viewing habits is quite scary, and they can tell when you pause a video, when you go back and watch something again. They know how many people have watched a product. And I think we talked about it on our previous episode on home streaming. They can look at how often that you do certain things, but it's up to the individual user to say, well, I need to be informed about it, and I also need to make choices that, if you're happy to have something that it provides convenience, then you need to cop the difference between that. And if I can, I've got my phone on me. I'll give you a really good example on tracking. If you're in Australia and you're a Woolworths customer and you use the Everyday Rewards card, the amount of tracking that they do on that is quite scary. And I'm just doing a quick search. Now, the one thing that they have changed is that they've gone, they used to say, oh, here's specials for this week. They've now changed the subject line to, here are your top 12 personalized specials.
All right.
Now, the thing I think is funny about this is that my wife and I both have our cards, but the email address linked to the card is actually mine. So I get the personalized specials email, both of them, to me. So you can tell about the bad habits that I have with the food that I eat, because you look at what my wife buys. It says, here's the top 12 personalized specials for this week: avocados, zucchinis, toilet paper, Coke, bread rolls, feminine sanitary products, avocado dip, and salmon, smoked salmon. Then we go to my personalized rewards, and it is
Potato chips.
Coke, Kit Kats, avocados, picnic bars, Farmers Union iced coffee, uh, almond ice creams, crumpets, and zucchinis. So you get a couple of overlaps, but you can really tell the difference in our food shopping habits. But that's all tracked. And of course, if I then use the discount voucher to get cheaper fuel, that's tracked as well. And you can actually log into that account. They're actually sort of quite open about it. Log into the account and do, and you can see, how much money you've saved, your specials and things like that. But what you don't see is that spending profile that you create, they actually then sell to manufacturers and marketers and things like that, who actually then get products put into the supermarket. I think Australians are a bit immune to the fact the backroom dealings that go on with all of your data to determine, who gets a product in, but even who pays for that data so that they can make product decision choices. So I think we've all got to. I think the short answer to that is we've got to make a conscious decision on, you know, of how much data we share, and if you really want to go tinfoil, tinfoil hat type thing, that really pay for everything in cash. But how convenient's that as well. I like my credit card points and all that sort of thing.
Yeah. Can I just hop off topic for 1 second?
Sure.
That tinfoil analogy is
Yes.
completely back to front, because apparently if you wear a tinfoil hat, it doesn't actually protect you from those sorts of things. It actually enhances them.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. There you go. That was
I don't wear a tinfoil hat.
No.
I think is the there.
Yeah, that's my little OCD moment.
Absolutely. We might move on to the next story, our last story in the news this week, and I'm sure we'll talk about it when Adam Turner is on the program. But NBN announced in the last week that they're about to relaunch their HFC NBN services. In a press release this week, NBN Co announced that it would increase its planned fibre to the curb footprint with an additional 440,000 homes and businesses around Australia set to receive the new technology. It takes the total planned FTTC footprint closer to 1.5 million homes and businesses by 2020. The additional premises added to the fibre to the curb footprint were originally planned for fibre to the node, long copper lines, and infill and extension premises within the existing HFC footprint. So that's where they have HFC, like exactly where my situation is that if you looked at a geographic map of where I live, the house that's literally 2 houses behind mine, and I'm pointing to them, which is really good for audio or video, that they have access to HFC, but I don't. And it's a relatively small amount of houses, and they might have, filled that in with extending the HFC network or done some fibre to the node. Well, they've gone, no, they're all going to get fibre to the curb. This extra rollout is in line with a strategy that they claim is using the most cost-effective and time-efficient technology in any given location. NBN Co will use the existing copper lead-ins to connect these properties to fibre to the curb. In addition to announcing the expansion of the fibre to the curb premises, NBN Co has announced that it will begin a staged resale of wholesale HFC services or hybrid fibre coax services to retailers starting on the 27th of April. NBN Co plans to release around 1,000 premises into the HFC access network footprint in Melbourne and Sydney. The company is planning to release around 38,000 HFC premises by the end of June in select areas across Brisbane, Gold Coast, Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide, and Perth. From July onwards, NBN Co expects to significantly ramp up the release of HFC premises to retailers, forecast to hit around 100,000 premises per month. NBN Co has undertaken considerable work on the network, ensuring network performance and stability has improved substantially, and a better service experience will be made to end users. The optimization program will continue across the HFC network, and NBN Co will update its website in the coming weeks to reflect these changes, starting with those declared to be ready to connect in April to June period. Now, I'm glad that it's happening. But the interesting thing was that last sentence. It said the optimization program will continue, and NBN Co will update its website in the coming weeks to reflect the changes. The NBN Co haven't updated their rollout plan on their website for months. I'm 100% sure of it. Considering when you look up my address, it says I'm getting fibre to the curb between April to June, and as we're recording this, it is mid-April, and it's planned. And I can tell you that they've been building that FTTC network for about 4 months. In fact, I had some workers with some green fiber in their hands at the front of my house on 2 days ago, putting some final touches to that network. So the HFC rollout is very so the FTTC rollout is well and truly under construction, but they're just not updating people. But the first houses I know in Coburg in Melbourne and in New South Wales were live on the fibre to the curb network in the past week or so. So from about the 10th of April, 9th or 10th of April, they were prepared to be connected. So interesting times ahead for the NBN.
So, all issues aside that the HFC may or may not have been experiencing, where does that sit in relation to fibre to the curb? Is it better? Is it worse?
I think that if you were, and I'm sure other people will tell me I'm wrong, but my grading of NBN services, we'll leave fixed wireless and satellite to the side because they were always in the NBN rollout plan anyway. How much areas have got from that has increased over time, but that is for the really remote people. But in terms of those fixed line services, fibre to the premises is absolutely at the top of the tree. And as you've experienced, Shane, even changing providers on fibre to the premises is a very simple exercise.
Yep.
Um,
Made another minor change too the other day.
yes, which we'll come back to. Then fibre to the curb, in theory, should sit in at number 2. So a standard fibre to the curb VDSL service should hit your 100 megabits if that's the type of plan that you've chosen. Quite simply because the distribution point unit or the node, for the want of a better term, is literally outside the front of your house. Then you've got, I would say HFC sits in it next. I think that in theory, the HFC network is actually pretty good. I just think that the implementation and what they're expecting from it has caused a number of issues. And Adam Turner, who we'll be talking to later, has written a lot of articles on the NBN, but one of the things was that the NBN service is doing triple duty on the HFC, particularly during the rollout, which is Telstra Cable, the legacy service, Foxtel Television, and NBN internet service. Well, progressively, the Telstra service will be handed over to NBN so that you'll completely wipe out one of those services. And NBN, Foxtel, as we've mentioned on previous shows, have announced that they're actually ditching HFC and they're going to move to satellite. So that's going to free up the entire cable network for NBN, and I think that they will be able to tweak that network better to suit their particular needs. So I think that the HFC will progressively, and it might take a while, but will progressively actually become quite a good news story on that. But we'll just be interested to see what happens. But the one thing that you talked about, Shane, and this in itself, you might go, who cares? But Aussie Broadband, which is a burgeoning ISP, who are an Australian-owned ISP, they announced in the last week or so that they would be moving to unlimited plans for their NBN broadband services. You go, well, TPG, INM, whoever has been offering them for a long time. The reason why I think it's important to note is that Phil Britt, who's the managing director of Aussie Broadband, had made a number of public statements going, we will not go to unlimited services because we think that it's a race to the bottom and it will impact our quality of service. I haven't signed up with Aussie Broadband yet. I'm intending on going to them. But they certainly, what's the word I'm looking for? But the reports that I've read, and even through your experience, Shane, is that they provide a pretty good service.
Mm.
And the other thing that they do as well is that they talk about their CVC, their connected virtual circuit capacity, which is often what causes the slowness on providers, is that they actually publicly publish stats on their website about how much capacity that they've got.
Yep.
So, it is a big deal. And for those who are interested in Whirlpool forums, if you have a look under the Whirlpool forum, that Phil Britt even made a post in there personally talking about the change in those plans. So you've moved over to a unlimited service? I know it's only early days, Shane, but have you noticed any degradation in the quality of the service, or you're just happy with what's happening at the moment?
It hasn't actually switched across yet.
Okay.
I was under the impression that they weren't actually coming out until May, so I was just oblivious to the fact I wasn't in a hurry to kind of change and all that kind of stuff. And then
Yep.
I got an email the other day from them about something that prompted me to kind of log in and have a look. And then sure enough, this unlimited plan was kind of sitting there. So as an option for me to choose. But how they do the plan change is it doesn't take effect until your next billing cycle.
Right.
So for me,
Okay.
it won't actually happen until the 26th of April. But I actually end up financially being better off because I was still technically currently on 100/40 and 1 terabyte download limit per month, and it was costing me $100. Still on the 100/40. It's now unlimited, and it's only costing me. It's only $1, but it's only costing me $99 now.
There you go.
But yeah,
so that's only $1, but still, and the extra service that you're getting as part of that is great. So look,
yeah,
I'm waiting to sign up with them. I'm sticking with my current provider for ADSL services until I change over to the NBN. But I'll be on the Aussie broadband wagon when I'm allowed to be,
yeah.
and I'm desperately waiting to allow to be. So
One of the other things that and I don't want this to be kind of an ad for Aussie Broadband because they're not a sponsor yet, but the Kogan has just released NBN plans that I believe are unlimited, I think, and it works out to be like $2 a day. So, and I know Aussie Broadband will price match if you kind of push the point and ask them. So, but I think the caveat or the gotcha with the Kogan ones is that you have to use one of their modems. And so, buying a modem, that's going to, if you spread that cost out over a year, that's going to work out the same price. And I think you actually have to sign a contract with them for a year or two. Don't quote me, but it looks like you're looking at the details now.
All important detail here is that you can't bring your own modem to the party. So we'll quickly look at the plans. Bronze Unlimited, which is $58.90 per month on the NBN 12. They're offering a launch special of $58.90 per month on the NBN 50, so the full half speed. Which is usual price of $68.90 and then $88.90 for the NBN 100. So they are cheaper. It depends on how price sensitive you are. They are definitely cheaper, but it's not. It's in the tens of dollars, not. It's like $12 or $11 a month cheaper. So
yeah,
I don't think it's that exciting. But yeah, the can't bring your own modem.
it's odd.
Yeah. That's one. Well, the thing is, I know that. Well, so technically on Telstra, you can bring your own modem, but if you want to use their landline phone service, that you have to use their phone or their modem to get that phone service.
Yep.
One of the reasons why I am moving to Aussie Broadband, I've heard that their internet service is very good and quite robust, but I like to play around with things, and I have a Raspberry Pi PBX sitting in my house, and I want to hook the phone service up through that, so I can have some multiple extensions and things like that. So That's just my personal choice. A lot of people ditch the phone line completely. I still have it for parental phone calls and things like that. They like ringing home phones, so we'll keep it for that purpose. But it's only, I'm not going to get any calls included. It's only going to cost $5 for that anyway. So that's not too bad. But yeah, it will be interesting to see how Kogan go. So yeah, they're being very aggressive in that market. They've obviously picked up a number of people through their mobile offering, and how they go through the NBN as well. I think that the one thing I do like about the NBN, and it's got its detractors on some of the technology that they use, but the whole point is that should, say for example, tomorrow, Shane, you and I decide to create the My Tech Opinion internet service provider, we can have access to the network on the same terms as Telstra do, as Optus do, as Kogan do, as Aussie Broadband do. Now, there are other things that will impact that, and whether we buy wholesale connected virtual circuit, charge off someone else, whether we run our own lines in, that sort of thing, that changes that. But really, we can do that. So there's no problems at all. So, and it allows these incumbents into the network like Kogan and things like that. So it does shake up the industry a bit, and I think that's a good thing. The one downside, like Telstra Cable, has been, up until, of course, it started to be implemented into the NBN, it's been a very good product, but you could only get it through Telstra. So that's where the NBN is, I think, being a success in that respect. The problem is that you can get bigger organisations, particularly around things like TPG, who then start to swallow up other smaller providers. We've seen them swallow up. We saw IONET take over Internode, and then we saw TPG take over IONET. Yep. And there's other little ones in there as well. I think NetSpace was bought out as well, and things like that. So, that's unfortunate, but each to their own, and hopefully that it gives us a good level playing ground on that network around the country. So yeah, interesting news from the NBN, and I'm sure I'll give you a bit of a run through in about 6 weeks' time when I have the ability to connect to the fiber to the curb network as well. So should be fun stuff. Anyway, I think we're finished with the news.
Yeah, just short and sweet this week.
Absolutely. We're going to take a short break on My Tech Opinion. We'll be back after this with our feature topic, talking tech journalism with freelance tech journalist Adam Turner. You're listening and watching My Tech Opinion. And welcome back to My Tech Opinion. And we've just had our news segment. It's now time to head into our feature topic. We're going to look at tech journalism. And joining Shane and I today is a freelance tech journalist, Adam Turner. Hi, Adam, and welcome to My Tech Opinion.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me on the show.
Thanks for joining us. I don't know where to kick it off. You're a tech journalist with Fairfax Media, and particularly The Age, some time ago, and you've gone freelance, and you're still writing for Fairfax as well. What got you specifically into tech journalism, or is it just a natural progression, or how did you sort of get into that field?
Well, the tech journalists, you can usually break up into two areas. It's either people who are journalists who became interested in tech, or people who are interested in tech who then move into journalism. And I'm of the former. I did a journalism cadetship at The Age 20 years ago. I'll go back a little bit. High school, I did a writing course at TAFE. I then used that to get into journalism at Deakin in Geelong. I then used that to get a cadetship at The Age. It took me 3 goes to get in. It's not easy. So I worked for The Age for a couple of years, and then in about the year 2000, I think, I was writing for Green Guide. I wanted to move somewhere different. A friend of mine who was on the tech section was moving to London, so I took his spot. I'd always been interested in tech, but my primary thing was I wanted to be a journalist. And at that point, sort of my two interests of writing and technology sort of nicely came together. And so that was, what we say, about 2000. So then in 2005, I was deputy editor of the business IT section of the Age and the Sydney Morning Herald, because they're combined.
Yep.
And I decided at that point that I wanted to go freelance. So I left the Age, but I kept writing for Fairfax. And even today, if you combine all the different parts of Fairfax that I write for, Fairfax is my biggest customer.
Yep.
So I started writing. I had a few columns that I was still writing for them when I left, and then I picked up work with other tech magazines and other publications. These days I do some corporate writing and stuff as well. So I've kind of sort of built on it from there. And most people, if you see my name anywhere, it's maybe in the Sydney Morning Herald or in the Green Guide in the Age on a Thursday. But as a freelancer, you sort of got to be all over the shop. You got to be known in all 5 boroughs, So yeah, that's kind of how I got to where I am. And I've now been a freelancer for twice as long as I worked for the paper. I worked for the paper for 7 years, and in the last few months I clocked up 14 years as a freelancer.
So, without harping too much on the Fairfax side of things for the moment, with the current state of print media, did you preempt the current world? It seemed to me that you've gone freelance, whereas a lot of writers for print media these days are freelance more so in the last few years. Did you sort of preempt that, or?
The freelance is kind of happening in waves, and a lot of those waves because there were lots of layoffs. And every time there's a layoff, a whole new flood of freelancers come in who have the contacts and experience because they've been staffers, so they're looking to pick up work. I was lucky in that I sort of came in between waves of that.
Yep.
So if I'd waited another 12 or 18 months to go freelance at the same time there was another one of those waves, it would have been a bit harder to pick up work because there would have been other new people coming into freelancing at the same time.
Yep.
But I'd be lying if I said I'm so smart that I sat there 14 years ago and could see what everything was going to be like today and could see that Trump was coming in. I could see everything in my crystal ball, but it was more kind of personal reasons that I went freelance. I was getting to the point where the nature of what I was doing for Fairfax was changing. The money maybe wasn't as good as I'd liked. I was at the point where I was going to have to start moving up. I was going to have to start moving. Like I was a deputy editor, so the next stage was to be an editor, and I could, having worked there for a long time and seen how things work, the further you move up the food chain, the less actual writing you do. The more of a manager you become. And so what I needed to figure out at that point was, am I a journalist who's interested in tech, or am I a nerd who can write? Because if you're a journalist who's interested in tech, but primarily a journalist in a newspaper or a big media organization is a good place to be. Lots of resources at your disposal, opens lots of doors. But if you're a nerd who can write, which is what I decide what I am, then you want to write. You want to do that as much as possible. You don't want to spend too much time in meetings or whatever. And once I figured out that I'm a nerd who can write, the obvious move was to go freelance and write for as many people as I can. Whereas if it was the journalism was what it was all about, then maybe sticking at the newspaper would have been a better decision. And I wouldn't go back. They could back a dump truck full of money up to my house and I wouldn't go back. I'm very happy. I've got 2 kids now and I've got a good situation, and it worked out okay.
Awesome.
I have a couple of questions. In relation to you becoming a tech journalist, especially in the early days, do you get the freedom to actually, even when you're still at uni, do you kind of start working out and then getting the appropriate training to become a tech journalist then, or do you just become a more of a generic journalist, and then when you get your first job, is it up to your employer to say, I want you to cover this kind of area, or do you get to tell them what you want? Or
I think it's probably different today than from when I started, because when I started, tech journalism was a fairly small area, and there weren't the breadth of outlets there are now. There was only a handful of people to write for, a handful of magazines like APC and PC Authority, and then your big newspapers like the Age, the Sydney Morning Herald, the Australian. So there wouldn't have really been people coming through determined to be a journalist and saying, I want to be a tech journalist, because it was a very niche area. It would have been people who maybe did business or did something else and had come to that, like Gary Barker, who wrote for the Fairfax for a long time as a tech writer. He was a war correspondent in Vietnam, and he's an amazing guy to talk to. So most of them at that point had come to it from another field, but they were trained old school journalists who decided to go to tech. Now, because tech is a larger area, you get people actually coming up through and who maybe already know when they're at university or high school that I want to be a tech journalist. So it'd be a bit of a different path. But now there's also more avenues to explore. If you are absolutely determined that you wanted to be a tech journalist, then maybe trying to get a cadetship with a mainstream newspaper is not the best thing for you. Because if you start as a cadet, you start at the bottom and you can't just walk in the door and say, I want to write for the tech section. Yep. You do what you're told. The first year they move you around the paper. So you spend a couple of months on business, a couple of months on sport, and then they'll put you wherever a spot is. So you've kind of got to work your way up. Whereas these days you might think, well, I'm a tech journalist. There are lots of tech outlets. I want to write for Gizmodo, or I want to write for Ozdroid, or I want to do whatever. So you would focus more on that perhaps than trying to get into a newspaper.
Okay.
I hope that answers your question.
Yeah,
I'm very good at sort of wandering all over the place. So don't be afraid to say, Adam, just bring it back to the topic.
That's it. With the we'll say democratization, we could say the thinning out in some aspects with the result of internet and blogs and things like that. Is it harder to does your background help stay sort of above other people? Because I mean, any two blokes could start up a tech podcast, for example, and talk to random people, Shane. And but does that impact what you do, if that makes sense?
Well, while I'm very happy being a tech freelancer today, there is no way I would go back and do my time again without working at Fairfax. Yep. Because that Fairfax name will always open doors for me. For the rest of my career, I will always be an ex-Fairfax journalist. It means people. It means people know you've got the training, you know how to write, you know how to meet a deadline, you've got all those skills. So it certainly is worth doing it that way. But these days, you might not want to go through that mainstream journalism path. But once you do, it opens doors for you. I know that it opens doors for me because I used to write for them, but also because I still write for them. Vendors don't invite me to things just because they like my face. They invite me to things because they want coverage in certain publications.
Okay,
excellent. And so I was going to bring up the invite thing.
Yeah, sorry, I screwed up your order of things.
No, that's fine. The one thing that I get very envious of tech journalists particularly is when I read the little byline at the bottom of an article that says, so and so traveled to Chicago as a guest of
Microsoft or something. Yeah.
How does that work? Obviously you've got to get the profile in the publications to be in that group, but how does it work? Do they expect you to write good things? They
can expect whatever the hell they want. That doesn't mean they get it.
Yeah.
That takes a long time. Like I've been a journalist for 20 years since I started as a cadet, and I've been freelance for 14. But it's only really in the last 5 that I've started doing international travel for work with people like Microsoft and Google. Part of it is that you've got to sort of work yourself to the top of the pile, because even when I started there were other people who were more important than me. And part of it is you need to sort of establish your sort of credibility in that area. But they also do play favorite. I mean, Apple's a classic example. Apple plays favorites. They're all people they will take on trips, and there are people they won't. And they tend to take people that they think they're going to get a good run from. But they can't tell you.
I can think of a name offhand, but that's
I can think of a few names offhand, but let's be cool, right? But but they can't tell me what to write, and they understand that. And they, especially with Fairfax, because if Fairfax thinks that I'm letting Google tell me, like I go to Google I/O in May in San Francisco to look at their new announcements and stuff, and they pay for my airfares and they pay for my hotel, but they don't pay me to go. Like Google doesn't put any money in my hand, but they cover my expenses, right? Yep. And they invite me because they know that my coverage will turn up in the Sydney Morning Herald. If I wasn't writing for Fairfax, they wouldn't be inviting me. But they also know that they can't tell me what to write. And if Fairfax felt that what I was writing was being influenced by Google, that Google was paying me, for example, to have a certain opinion, they wouldn't take my stuff anymore.
Sure.
So it's in my own best interest to make sure that I don't let that happen.
That said, those events are usually highly polished events too. So
yes, and they're really good at giving you the access to the people that you need to get good stories, because there's two ways to go about it, right? Well, they're inviting two kinds of journalists. They're inviting freelancers and they're inviting staffers, right? So for example, they're inviting me, who's a freelance for Fairfax, and then representing news media, News Limited, they might invite Jen Dudley Nicholson, who's a national tech editor, right?
Yep.
I don't have a boss that I have to convince to be allowed to go. I'm my own boss. So I have to decide, am I going to sell enough stories out of this to make it worth a week out of the office? Jen doesn't have to consider that because she gets paid at the end of the week regardless. But she has to convince her boss to let her go. So she's still the same thing, has to convince her boss, is there enough stories in this? So when Google invites you on a trip, it's in their best interest to ensure that they give you access to the bigwigs, that they give you access to the review units, that they give you enough to write about, because they know if you come home and you don't produce enough stories because they didn't give you access to enough stuff, either next time you're as a freelancer, you're going to go, well, it's not worth me going. Or as a staffer, your boss is going to say, well, you're not going because you went last year and you wrote one story.
Yeah.
So if I can just dive in here. So are you comfortable, because I read an article, and it wasn't from you, I don't think, but I read an article recently where they're implying or inferring that the Apple HomePod isn't doing as well as Apple had hoped, and they'd actually cut down orders, all that kind of stuff. So in your mind, you may have been invited to an event by Apple, say the launch of the HomePod. You were completely free to later on, if it turns out to be a dud, write an article saying that it's a dud product.
I've got a long history of calling people things duds. If you want to actually, and people too, if you want to go back to, and they know that and they wear it. Even when you write a review, if you say something's a piece of crap, as long as you can back it, you're okay. And that's what I found. Like I'm a hard marker when it comes to reviewers. I'm a glass half empty marker, because I figured the box will tell you what it's good at. It's my job to tell you what it's not so good at, so you can make a decision, is this still a good product for me, right? So more often than not, my reviews will focus on what's not so great about it. And I very rarely get complaints from the vendors, because I then back it with points. I don't like this because of this, this, and this. And it's not as good as the Amazon one because of this. It's not as good as the Google one because of this. But then it's got, and if you back that, and that's experience. That's years of doing it, knowing how to look at things, having the advantage of having looked at the competition and knowing what's good. And if you bring all that to it, they'll usually cop it sweet and go, oh, we were hoping you'd be nicer to us than that. But that is a fair and reasonable analysis. And that's really what I'm, of course, as a journalist, I'm aiming for. If you just say this thing's a piece of crap, then they're going to complain.
Okay.
That's what I found anyway. Like I said, I'm a harsh marker, and I very rarely get complaints about that, because I explain the reasons behind my thinking.
Okay. So that another question that kind of branches off from that. Within tech journalism, there are other kind of niche things. You can be someone who is purely a Microsoft, like a Paul Thurrott and Mary Jo Foley kind of are. You can be just a person who reviews stuff, and then even then you can focus on things like TVs or whatever. Do you have you gone further into the tech journalism area, and do you just do reviews, or where do you kind of focus?
I do a bit of everything, because I write for a lot of people, and they all want a bit of everything. When I first left the paper, I just wanted to be a reviewer. That's all I wanted to do. And so I was turning down work like writing case studies and stuff like that, which isn't as interesting, but is more lucrative in terms of how long it takes to do for the money you get. But the problem is with reviewing is that it's generally not worth it if you do it properly. The way to make good money out of reviewing is to just knock it over as fast as you can, which is a terrible review. But to really spend the time with something and do it properly, sometimes when you look at the money, it's like, well, that wasn't really worth it. But then as a freelancer, what you do is you then say, all right, well, this morning, I'm going to write this boring corporate case study that's going to pay this much money, right? And so then that's a day's worth of money. So this afternoon, I can play with the television, and I might only get paid this much for it, but I've still made enough money to cover the day. So the boring stuff buys you the time to do the stuff that you're interested
Okay, fair enough.
Cool.
Any other questions, Phil?
Yes, now, when we're talking about reviewing products, this is a a simple one. You get to keep the stuff.
in. Mostly no. Occasionally, it kind of depends what it is. Sometimes they'll say, and how much it's worth. Like if you're reviewing something that's worth $50, they don't want it back. It's going to cost them $50 to send a courier to get it. They're like, don't worry about it. Yep. Quite often what they'll do is like something like a Google Home, right?
Yep.
Review the Google Home. They haven't asked for it back. They said, hang on to it. But the reason why is because it's a constantly evolving product.
Yep.
And so there's all, every couple of months there's going to be a story about it's doing a new thing of this, a new thing of that. They don't want to be shipping me one every 3 months so I can turn it around and ship it home. And it's in their advantage and to my advantage to have the product, to get to know it and how it works. It's not like a TV where you switch it on and you test it. And once you're done with it, well, you know everything you need to know about it, you send it back. So that's kind of an area where they would say, look, hang on to it because it's going to be useful for you. It's going to be useful for everybody. The newspapers that I write for get a better stories from me about them because I spent the time with it. So when a new feature comes along, I can say, well, this is good. This is not so good. It doesn't necessarily mean I write a more positive story, but it means I write a more in-depth story.
And often they like you, unless it's really, really bad, they like you just writing about it, I suppose.
Well, that's the thing. They figured, well, okay, 3 lots of smart speakers. You've got Apple, you've got Amazon, you've got Google. And I've got all 3 of them in my house at the moment. The Apple one's probably due to go back soon. Apple tend to be more proactive about hang on to it for a couple of months, then we want it back. Whereas the others like, hang on to it. If we need it back, we'll let you know. But so if you're Amazon and you've got your Alexa speakers and you know that I've got an Apple speaker to hang on for a couple of months and you know that Google sent me a speaker to hang on for a couple of months and you send me a speaker and ask for it back after a week, in 3 months' time, when an editor says to me, oh, do me a roundup of what's the latest with all the smart speakers. Well, of course, Amazon Alexa's going to get the short straw because I haven't spent the time with it. So it's just in their interest to say, look, just hang on to it. So that way, whenever you're writing about this category, we've got as good a chance of being in there as anybody else. And that's what I try to do, is to balance things out. If you're writing about a particular category, to not write too much about just one. Like, because Apple's a classic example. Apple carries on like they invented the smartphone, like they invented the music player, and they would almost be brave enough to try and claim they invented the smart speaker. They clearly didn't because they were late and it's not as smart as the others anyway, but they would love to. Yeah. There's someone in the marketing department going, can't we just pretend we invented it? So you've got to, you can't write. And when you read a story that's like, Apple has just changed the world by coming up with the smart speaker, it's like, really? Were you born yesterday? Have you not looked at the other products? So that's, as a journalist that's getting paid by major publishers to do good work, you need to have a bit more depth to your coverage than I was born yesterday and, hey, this thing is amazing.
Yep. Fair enough. I agree with you on that too. I'm an Apple fanboy and I even think Apple haven't done it.
I'm sitting here thinking what's going through Phil's head while Adam's bagging Apple.
And as I said, I'm an Apple fanboy, and even with I think Apple have dropped the ball a bit on the HomePod, but that's just a whole other discussion.
Siri doesn't do enough on the HomePod. It sounds amazing. The sound is fantastic, but Siri can't do much compared to what Alexa and Google Assistant can do.
No, and I think and you might think otherwise, and we're sort of diverging of tech journalism, but I think at the moment that the Google Home is the winner in terms of its smart capability.
Yes.
Amazon have a long way to go, but it's very too US centric at the moment.
That's the problem.
And then she goes.
You just wait. That's what I don't have any in this room for that reason. And it's funny whenever I've got my own podcast I do, Vertical Hold, with another tech journalist, Alex Kidman, and each week we have a guest on. And whenever we want to talk about smart speakers, our guests often have to talk around it. Like even in my house, they're called Gigi and Lexi, because if you talk about them, they respond. So yes, you'll often hear that in podcasts.
And on a weird side note, before we continue, I'm not allowed to have them anywhere else but in my study office because my dog gets anxiety attacks over smart speakers talking randomly.
Yeah. My brother-in-law's little girl is maybe 3 or whatever. and the Google Home talking in the corner scares the hell out of her. My
Yeah.
kids are older, like they're okay with it, but yeah.
Anyway,
But going back to just jumping back for a second to what we we're talking about earlier about
sure.
how you get into technology, there was kind of a shift when you look at of the technology. I'm 43, right? So I was sort of one of that tail end of the old school journalists who did their journalism training when, I mean, the internet existed, but there was no such thing as podcasting. There was no such thing as blogs. There was no such thing as online publishing. And that stuff didn't exist when I was in high school or at uni.
Yep.
When you look today, a lot more of even the tech writers for the big publications like the Age and the Sydney Morning Herald have come through a different path. And I know Asher Moses, who used to write for Fairfax, Ben Grubb, who used to write, they were both online tech editors. I'm not sure so much about Tim Biggs's background, who's the online editor now. They started as bloggers. And then as bloggers, they got a job with somewhere like, I think Asher might have been with Haymarket or somewhere like that. Like they've worked their way up through the industry and then got poached from Fairfax from one of these other online tech publications. So that's kind of the path that tech writers at Fairfax would have taken today. When you look at the younger ones, they don't tend to be ones who've come through and done a cadetship and then moved into tech. They seem to be ones who've got interested into tech, moved up through the industry where they were then of the caliber that someone like a Fairfax said, yeah, come and write for us.
Do you, and with that blogging world, do you find that there's an expectation that, I mean, you do a podcast, but there's that expectation to be multimedia focused rather than just punching out words?
I think you'd have to be today. If you were a journalism student today, or if you were interested in getting into tech media and you don't have any multimedia skills and any social media skill, it's not going to happen. You have to be the triple threat, as they say in the entertainment industry. You have to be able to sing, dance, and act. Right.
Yep.
I make money now out of podcasting. I make money out of editing podcasting. I've made money out of video reviews, all that stuff that I'd had no training in and that weren't even a thing when I was at uni. But I've branched into those areas because I could see that that's where the money was going to come from. And every few years, I'll look at something new and go, right, this is a new field. I'm going to start moving into that. And sometimes I might do a bit for free, just to, like, you don't do too much for free because you're shooting yourself in the foot. But everything I get paid for today, the first time I ever did it was for nothing. But it was always as part of a learning experience and a roadmap to know that when a paid gig comes along, I can say, yes, I know how to do that. I know how to make a podcast. I know how to edit a podcast. I know how to shoot and edit video because I've done it before. Even when I was at uni, I edited student newspapers.
Yep.
I did that for nothing. But then I got a job between uni and working at the Age. I got a job as a desktop publisher for a student union. So I was building their website. I was building their, I was doing their newspaper. I learned all those skills doing it for free for the student newspaper, but on the understanding that they were setting me up for what comes next. So if you want to get into the industry today, you really should be looking at all those skills and figuring out which ones can work for you. And when work comes along, you want to be able to go, yeah, I know how to do that.
Okay.
Excellent.
So, I actually have met Ben Grubb. I was in, as you probably know, I was in San Fran back in September, and went and saw Twit, and he happened to be there on the same day. I was surprised to sort of hear that he actually kind of came up through the blogging world and didn't kind of do the normal, what you're calling an old school kind of journalism kind of.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure the first time I met Ben, he was writing for, I want to say ZD now. I can't remember who it was, but I remember talking to him before he was at Fairfax. And I think the same with Asher Moses as well. The first time I met them, they were somewhere else. But that sort of seems to be the path now. But the other thing is that the mainstream media has very few staff tech writers these days. The bulk of the tech writing in Australia for the mainstream media is done by freelancers.
Right.
When you look at Fairfax, you look at Livewire, everyone who writes for Livewire in the middle of Green Guide is a freelancer, except for Tim Biggs, who's the online editor. Everyone else who writes for Tim. You look at somewhere like the Australian, they've got a couple of people. They've got Superton, they've got David Swan, they've got Chris Griffith. They've got a bigger team than Fairfax has. But still, a lot of what you see in there are freelancers. But it's the same. It's the usual suspects. It's those of us who've often where ex-staffers have gone freelancers. You've already got the contacts. They know you've got the skills. So it's not too hard to say, hey, have you got any work going?
Okay.
And I know Peter Wells, who does a lot of writing on particularly Apple products, but in general, Fairfax is he's a academic, I think, by profession.
He works in he's like an IT manager or something like that in academia. So yeah, I don't know what I know him, and I've sat down with him a couple of times. I don't know exactly what his background is, but I don't think it's a journalism degree.
No, I don't think so. I know he did a lot of work with Mac Talk in its old incarnation.
Yeah, and he does another podcast as well. This is embarrassing. I can't remember. I know that's wrong.
No, the Daily Tech News or something like that.
Yes, that sounds right. Yeah, so it's the same thing. He's worked his way up and got each gig builds on the last, and then builds that bit more credibility. You get to know a few more people. Your name gets known, and you sort of build on that. It's got to be in those early days. It's got to be a bit of a long-term plan, because without wanting to sound like a wanker, you're competing against people like me. So you're not going to be rivaling what I do overnight, but you are going to be sort of working towards that. Right?
Cool.
So, I know it's different for different things you write about, but how quickly do you churn stuff out? Is it easy for you to just go from conception to publication within a week, or is there stuff that you spend
a week
months on?
I thought you were going to say an hour.
Really?
It depends it depends who I'm writing for.
Oh, okay.
I had an arrangement with Fairfax for 10 years, which it's changed this year. But I had an arrangement with Fairfax for 10 years where I wrote a blog for them 3 days a week about whatever the hell I wanted. And then I logged into the system and hit publish, and the editor didn't read the story until after I hit publish on it. So they would get up on a Monday morning, what's in the news? What am I going to write about today? Try and turn it around in an hour or two and hit publish by lunchtime. So sometimes you turn it around quickly, but other times it will be, especially if you've got to interview people. They might say, all right, we want a big piece on, well, the NBN is probably the classic example. I wrote a few good NBN stories last year that actually got things changed. They got Optus taken to court. They got rules changed about the Ready for Connect and all that kind of stuff. One of those stories took me a month. Now, it wasn't all day, every day for a month. Like I was still working on other stuff during them. But those stories took me a long time. And I only got paid for the words. So in terms of value for money, it was an appalling thing for me to do. Yep. But it was something I felt passionate about, something I felt that needed to be done. And that's the reason why the people that I work for will use me, because they know that when I need to, I'll go above and beyond, and I'm not going to go, oh, screw this story, guys. It's not worth enough money to me. You've got to bring enough to the table that, like, okay, this person is a pro, and when it needs to be done, they'll get it done. And then I'll turn around another story in an hour. So it swings and roundabouts.
Yep.
Yeah. Fair enough. Go on, Phil.
No, you go.
I was just going to say, I'm jumping all over the top a little bit, but in relation to the products that you get, do you, in general, have to wait until they're actually available to the public and then just go down and get one, or do you get access to them?
No, they ship them to me, and they usually get them to me. Sometimes it's before they're available. Sometimes it's as they're going on sale. This week, LG is shipping me one of their new OLEDs on Friday. I don't think you can buy them in the shops yet. They're only launching them. They're launching them this week. I think the launch is on Monday or Tuesday, whatever, in Sydney. I'm in Melbourne, so I'm not going up to the launch. But they're sending me a review unit, so I'll have one of the first review units. So then those reviews will maybe run, we'll say, the week after. So the reviews can be up by the time that people can see them. By the time they're in the shops ready to buy, you can start to read reviews about them to know if it's the right TV for you.
So does that mean that you avoid signing things like NDAs and that kind of thing?
Sometimes I have to. Sometimes, and Apple's really good. When Apple comes up with a new, not so much me, but for people who they like to look after, they'll give you the new Apple Watch or the new iPhone before they'll even admit that it exists and make you sign your first kid away, right? And other times, they'll send you review units, but what they'll say is, you can have the review unit now, but the embargo on reviews is, next Friday, 10 a.m. So you've got 2 weeks to play with it. So then you can do a good, thorough review of it, but don't put your review up for that date. And I tend to respect that, because there's nothing to be gained from me trying to beat somebody else by an hour. All I've done is burn a vendor who then next time won't give me early look at it because I was a jerk about it last time.
Okay. And do you see a difference between journalists and people who call themselves commentators? Like, for argument's sake, you're obviously a journalist, but there's no way.
It's a tricky one. It kind of it goes back to that John Laws thing where he felt that he didn't have to follow the media ethics rules because he was not a journalist; he was an entertainer or whatever the hell he called himself.
Okay.
Yes, there are people who clearly fall in one category, and there are people who clearly fall in the other, and there's a lot of grey in the middle.
Is it like an us and them thing, or do you all kind of live harmoniously, or?
You try. It's too small an industry to make enemies if you can help it, especially the tech media. We all know each other. Yeah. Like whenever I'm talking to a friend and they say, "Oh, I heard someone talking tech on the radio the other day," it's always someone I know. Because there's really the bulk. While there's a lot of freelancers, there's a small amount of us that do the bulk of the work. So you could probably you could pick 24 tech writers in Australia, freelancers and staffers, who are doing the bulk of the mainstream tech media that you write. But then another, 50, 100 around that who are sort of doing the edges. But that's still a fairly small industry. We have an awards night and there's 300 people in the room and half of them are journos and half of them are PR people. So it's at the point where most of those people in the room, I know who they are, and most of them, they know who I am. So you don't sort of want to go around starting fights with people if you can help it.
Yeah.
No, I think I've been to one of those.
The Lizzies.
It's. I was being a community radio podcaster. Effectively, I was very much on the outside because everyone definitely knows each other. So.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But then there's the whole peripheral around that of people who consider themselves reviewers or consider themselves commentators, but don't necessarily have that journalism mentality. And it's not just the training. It's not just a piece of paper that says I went to Deakin or I went to RMIT, but it's that process of how you do things, not just the professionalism of can you submit clean copy and file on time, but can you look at things objectively? Do you know how to interview people, how to balance things out? And that's because I know in a minute you're going to ask me about citizen journalism. And of course, I have a vested interest in that. No, citizen journalism is bad because they're stealing my jobs. They took my jobs. But there is a skill set. People think that, journalists don't bring anything to the party. Anyone who was standing in that room could have written that down and done the same job. But they don't. I wouldn't trust a citizen pilot. I wouldn't get on a plane and say, today we've got a citizen pilot flying you to San Francisco. It's like, I'll hop off, thank you. There is a certain skill, but the problem is that the mainstream media was then too arrogant about that. It's like, we're too big to fail. We're really important. You're nobody. You shut up. We talk. You listen. That model doesn't work anymore. But I think sometimes it's swung a bit too far the other way, where anybody thinks that what they put out can be of the same caliber and worthy of the same respect. And no, that takes time and effort and experience, and in some cases, training to match that.
And look, I agree with that. I have I'll say this now with a caveat at the end of it. I've got no issue with citizen journalism as a principle or as an idea.
Yeah.
But my issue with it is that it gets completely, by some people, it gets completely mixed up with what real journalism is. So
yes,
there are the member of the public who don't delineate between the two, whereas really citizen journalism is a opinion piece more so than an actual fair and reasonable news reporting.
But also in the and not wanting to go down this rabbit hole, but in the age of fake news, how do you when someone's a citizen journalist? How do you know they're really a citizen journalist? How do you know who's putting money in their pocket? Who are they backed by? What's their allegiances? What's their biases? At least if someone's writing for a mainstream publication, you kind of have an idea of who they are, and you might know. Okay, well, News Limited tends to lean to the right, Fairfax tends to lean to the left, but you know that, and you allow for that, and you choose the publications that you want. But you also know that if you're reading something that's written by one of those mainstream publications, that the vendor they're writing about hasn't put a cash envelope in their hand, because it can't work. The vendors know that. They don't even try it. Well, not in this country anyway. But with with an influencer, if you want to annoy a journalist, use the word influencer, right? With influencers, who knows? So while they have a role to play, you've got to approach it with that same thought of, okay, Who are you? What is your what are your motives? What bias are you bringing to the table?
Awesome. Well, we are going to have to wrap it up in a moment, but there was, before we go there, I'll ask you this question without notice. What do you think are, we'll say in the last 10 years or so, three, we'll say tech story hits and three misses that you've seen? And that's a really broad question, but what do you think? Three things that have been good that have come out that you might have reviewed, reported on, talked about, and three things that are a bit of a miss and probably could have been.
Yeah. Right. Well, the big things which are still happening are machine learning and artificial intelligence. They are separate things, but we'll group them together here. That's just massive, and it now underpins so many things. And when you talk to Google about what they're doing with that kind of stuff, I still think we're only just really the tip of the iceberg of where that stuff's going. Smart speakers are a positive one, because I think they are the missing glue that holds together the smart home. When you had smart home stuff, but you had to get your phone out of your pocket to turn the lights on, nobody wants to do that. But when you can talk to things, suddenly a whole lot more of the smart home makes sense. It becomes convenient rather than annoying. That'd be two. Duds would be smartwatches. Still don't think of quite. They're a problem looking for a solution, looking for a problem.
Yep.
And I mean, the NBN is just a gift that keeps on giving. We call it our soup du jour on Vertical Hold, my podcast, because there's just always something to talk about. And it's just so up and down and such a mess. The idea is great. The execution is just a mess. But yeah, you've always got something to talk about while the NBN's around.
Do you believe that the NBN, I have a belief that, varying degrees, of course, but the NBN was always going to be a mess, regardless of whoever was in control.
It was always going to be, any big government project of that nature is never going to go smoothly. There are always going to be problems. But as soon as you brought in the multi-technology mix, you just multiply the opportunities for problems. And each new technology into the mix comes with its own problems. I think the fiber to almost everybody, like 93% of the homes, would have been a lot more straightforward, because they would have been through those teething problems once, got it right, settled in. As the technology got cheaper over time, I think we would be in a much better position. But there would still be stories of this installer stuffing it up, or this thing's costing too much. It still would have been a mess, but not this kind of mess.
Now, I know you mentioned it on your Vertical Hold podcast this week, or in most recent episode, but do you think fiber to the curb? I'm 6 weeks away, almost to the day, until my fiber to the curb gets switched on. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Do you think that's going to be the silver bullet for the MTM? That's going to be where they've found their sweet spot?
Yeah, but the problem is that Turnbull has to save face. Even if they leave one poor bastard on HFC cable as like the token guy still using it, right? They can't ditch the Telstra HFC network the way they did Optus, because when people talked years ago about doing that, Turnbull came out and called people idiots. You don't know what the hell you're talking about. HFC's fine. So there will always be some HFC, and the same with fiber to the node. They can't turn around now and get rid of all that fiber to the node, because we're too far down the path, and they've spent too many years telling us, oh, it's not so bad. The best thing you can do now is tweak the mix, which is what they're doing. You notice every 6 months or so, some more fiber to the curb just slowly creeps into the rollout. Whereas if they had announced, when Bill Morrow first showed off fiber to the curb, I think in 2016, to a handful of journalists, we went up to Redcliffe in Queensland. We saw the HFC rollout, and we saw the first fiber to the curb trials. And at the time, he was like, oh, well, I'm using it sparingly, maybe just 100,000 houses. If he had said at that time, oh, this is going to 1.5 million houses, that would have been a big thing. But I think they maybe suspected at the time that it was going to be more. They just got to sneak it in.
Interesting. And do you think that, and I know we're talking specifics now, but do you think that the Foxtel announcement that they're going to be leaving the HFC cable, they say it wasn't related to the NBN, but I think
this has to be, this has to be a factor, yeah.
That will provide a bit of extra life, because it gives NBN a bit more freedom about what frequencies they use on that cable, or? Yeah,
there has been, and I don't know all the technical details of that, but I do know that there are some issues there with it, because they've got the Telstra the Telstra broadband running on it, the Foxtel running on it, and then they're trying to run the NBN broadband on it as well. And as you say, the frequencies are overlapping. So once Foxtel is out of the way, they've got more control how they use that cable. But also, once Foxtel is off the cable, then it's more a master of its own destiny, because Foxtel has always kind of been limited by who owns the cable, what are they going to do, how's this going to work, and it was maybe Foxtel was like half owned by Telstra, half owned by News Limited, so it was always competing with itself. And so I think they're probably in a better position once we can say, well, screw the cable, we just put people on satellite, and then we can do our own thing with our own satellite and not have to do what you guys want. So I think in the long term, it's probably going to work out better for them as well.
Interesting.
So,
all right. Anyway, you go, Shane.
Yeah, one more question. Actually, I had a couple, but that's fine. With the NBN, with Bill Morrow jumping ship, do you think? I mean, the end is in sight, really. When you compare the whole history, wouldn't you have thought he would have stuck it out until it was all done and dusted?
I don't know. I haven't spoken to him since then, so I don't know what his motives are. But no, the end is kind of in sight, but there's a hell of a lot of garbage to go through between now and then. All of this stuff about how much node do we keep, how much HFC do we keep, how much curve do we put in, all of that stuff's actually about to come to a head in the next 12, 24 months. That's really going to blow up in their faces. The multi-technology mix, the disaster is the multi-technology mix is coming home to roost. I think I've mixed my metaphors there, but you know what I mean? So maybe now is the time to get out. But also, we must be coming up on another election as well. I feel sorry for Morrow. He did the best he could. He was handed a turd and a polishing cloth and said, do your best. He was put in a bad situation. He can't do what he wants to do. He can't do what he thinks is best because he has to follow this mandate of cheaper, faster, better. And they've actually done their best. They could have just stuck with node. They actually have done their best to try and slip in things like fiber to the curb. So they are trying to, where they can justify it financially. But I don't envy the guy. And I don't envy whoever comes in next, because they've still got that same thing of you actually can't do the job properly because you've got the government telling you what you have to do.
Do you know who is going to be the next one? Have you got any insights?
No, I've got no idea. Some poor schmuck.
Yeah, and I think you're right there. I think he said he's going to hang around till the end of the year.
I think it's the end of this year, yeah.
Yeah, and then the replacement comes in and we're due for an election midway through next year.
You don't want to be running the NBN during an election or after an election, because even if Labor gets back in, it's too late to go back to fiber for everybody. That's never going to happen. There's too much already in the ground. We're too far down the track. So then it'll be like, okay, so how do we tweak the multi-technology mix again? I wouldn't be surprised if Labor went on the policy of there'll be no more node, and everyone that was going to get node will now get curb. So stiff for the poor guy who got node on day one. You should have waited until the end of the rollout.
Yeah.
But even then, do you want to be the guy or the girl dealing with that? No thanks. I'd rather do what I do.
Absolutely. All right, we will have to finish it up because I know that you do need to nick off, Adam. But thank you very much for joining us on My Tech Opinion.
Thanks for having me on the show.
We might have to, we might call on you again on if we get into a big NBN topic or something like that in the future.
Yeah, sure, that'd be good.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much to Adam Turner joining us on My Tech Opinion. We'll take a short break and we'll be back after this. And welcome back to My Tech Opinion. That's it for the show on this episode 8, with a big thanks to Adam Turner for joining us. That was a really good conversation, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, no, it was great. He's definitely knows his stuff, and he's got a wealth of knowledge, and he was willing to share it, so it was good.
Absolutely. We'll hopefully have Adam back on the show again in the future. I think he has a lot more to say about the NBN. So we talked about it in our news section, but then specifically with Adam. So we might have to have him on if we hit that topic again at some point in the future as well.
Mm.
Absolutely. I want to become a tech journalist that gets the free flights.
Yeah.
The problem is I'm not a journalist. So
no, but he was sort of saying you don't really have to be.
Yeah, I know. I think that from the one thing he was saying was that the discipline of working in a newsroom, and getting your copy in and timing and things like that is the key. And that training he's had gives him the ability to pump out, a review in an hour or something like that. Whereas I would spend hours writing something like that. So, and sometimes you've got to write about stuff that doesn't really interest you that much either. So,
yeah, you're going to take the good with the bad.
Exactly. So anyway, that brings us to the end of another show. I think we were talking in our pre-production meeting, Shane, and we were saying that next week's topic is, you're laughing at me about our pre-production meeting. Our topic on our next episode 9, episode 9, will be on privacy settings in social media. So we'll talk about some of the privacy settings and things that you can do to help you, since we're in that big discussion about privacy in Russians and elections and fake news and all that sort of stuff. So I think that'll be a good topic to hit on. If you've got any thoughts or questions about our next topic, feel free to send us an email, which you can do at mytechopinion@prosumerit.com, or visit the website prosumerit.com/MTO. We're also on Twitter at prosumerid, which I don't think we've done a lot with, but we should do some more. Facebook.com/prosumerit and YouTube.com prosumerit.au, which I probably said the wrong thing, but you can get everything via our webpage, prosumerit.com/MTO. You can also hear us on Aussie Tech Heads Radio, any app that supports Shoutcast, so things like TuneIn and what have you, or you can do it on the web at aussietechheads.com.au/radio. Not only can you hear My Tech Opinion, but you'll also hear Geeks Interrupted, Aussie Tech Heads, and a heap of other Aussie Tech programs as well. So Shane, thank you very much for joining us and organising our interview today that we had with Adam.
That's fine. Can I just circle back to the social media stuff?
Sure.
Especially Twitter. We had our first bit of feedback via Twitter from, I think the guy's name is Mike. His actual Twitter handle kind of escapes me at the moment, but yeah, he gave us some feedback on our previous episode. So thanks for that, Mike. You know who you are. So we really appreciate it.
Mick Foster it was.
That's him. Yes. So yeah, any feedback, comments, suggestions, anything like that, we're obviously open to. As we've already kind of touched on, provide comments and ratings and reviews on things like the podcast through the Apple Podcast app, on the webpage, on YouTube even, especially with how they've changed the rules with YouTube. You can't monetize these days until you've got, I think it's 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 hours or something. So there goes.
We won't have issues with the hours. We'll just need to get the subscribers going.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, anything like that would be greatly appreciated.
Absolutely. So yeah, Apple Podcast app, just do a search for us and you can leave your feedback there, and comments and reviews, and subscribe to us on YouTube, as Shane said. So that would really help us get attention in Podcast App Store and get more people interested in the program, which helps us stay going, which is important too. So we will make a finish to it now. Thank you very much, Shane, and I look forward to seeing you on our next episode.
Absolutely. Can't wait.
Excellent. Well, that has been My Tech Opinion for episode 8. We'll see you next time. Have a good time, everyone. Bye.
Bye.